The Final Fantasy VII remake that recently came out for the PlayStation 4 can give us a lot to talk about. We could talk, for instance, about how the combat gets a little boring. You could talk about how the sewer levels kind of suck, the subquests are a grind, and of course we could talk also about how terrible the ending is. But I'm not really interested in talking about any of that right now. What I want to talk about are the two main female characters, Aerith and Tifa, who together are probably two of the most iconic female video game characters in all of gaming history, and that's not an exaggeration. Few other characters have as much fan art or cosplay as these two collectively have. In fact, I would wonder what percentage of fan art of characters in general these two are taking up. It's got to be like 2 or 3%, right? Because they are immensely popular. It gets to the point where it gets a little absurd, right? Especially when it comes to the debate over which one of these two characters should get together with the main character, Cloud. Because the game has romance options and is in fact probably one of the first of the mainstream games to have romance options. That has been something that has been debated for, well, the better part of 20 years, I suppose. What has it been, 23 years? Yeah, we've been talking about that for that long. But are either of these characters actually any good? Can we say that either of these characters are well written, well developed, or well rounded characters created by a masterful author? Well, let's take a look at both of them, shall we? Let's start with Tifa. Tifa, who is supposed to be one of the main characters of the story, has huge aspects of her character that don't really matter. She's supposed to be a mega athlete, and she is your party's direct damage melee fighter, but the game never bothers to answer a simple question, which is, why? Why is Tifa that strong? How did she get that strong? Did she trade a lot with someone? Who did she train with? What kind of training regime does she have? How exactly did this woman get strong enough to punch out a robot? How did that happen? Right? It's a huge aspect of her character that just is completely ignored as the story goes on. Because, well, it just sort of is. Right? It just sort of is taken for granted. Yeah, Tisa's a mega athlete, and that's how it is, right? So there's just this huge hole in her character that's just sort of left there for the viewer to try to figure out. Then there's the whole thing with Tifa being a bartender who mixes a grand total of one drink in the entire game, entire story, and who never mentions mixing drinks or wanting to mix a drink ever again at all for the duration of the story. How Tifa developed an interest in mixing cocktails is not really explored in the game or even explained. She just does it for her one introductory scene, and then that's about all you will ever hear about it for the rest of the story, right? So we have a character here whose background is that she's a martial artist, though she never explains how she became a martial artist, and whose job is to be a bartender, although why she became a bartender isn't really explained either. So essentially, she's got a backstory, but that backstory has no bearing on her personality, her motivations, or basically anything about her, right? It's just sort of, a sort of something that's thrown in the background to her and not given much serious thought beyond that. Then, of course, there's the fact that Tifa has two extremely large breasts. No, seriously, let's talk about that. Tifa is probably most famous for the quite frankly, ridiculous outfit that she has, along with all the silly, stretchy poses that she would do both in the old game and the new game alike. So she does look like this, right? And it's a very gratuitous sort of outfit, and I have to say, it bothered me throughout the entire game how those like straps on her chest, right, were always like on the edges of her breasts. You never see them like worn properly. They're always like bulging out, right? You know, it's a sort of irritating character design thing that always gets to me because, like, yes, I know Tifa, you have boobs, congratulations. But let's compare the way she looks with what her backstory, at least the one part of it that makes sense, is supposed to be about. Tifa is doing the old childhood friend thing, right? Cloud goes off to become a soldier, all caps, and fight in the wars and be a hero and all that. And she's that faithful childhood friend that's going to, follow him, watch over him, and be faithful to him, most importantly, as he goes to do his manly, heroic stuff, right? At some point, apparently, while Cloud is becoming a soldier, he goes ahead, or she goes ahead and learns how to be a bartender and elite level martial artist at the same time, but we'll not worry about that. Regardless, the whole thing, the whole trope that Tifa is invoking, and perhaps even had a good hand in really promoting and starting, is the whole childhood friend loyal for the years and years that unfold, right from the time she was 6 years old or however old she's supposed to be in this picture to whenever they meet again as adults, right? That whole thing that's been done in 20 or 50 or 500 animes over the years. That's what Tifa is going for, right? So she's that virginal childhood friend, so pure, so loyal, all that stuff, right? That's what Tifa is all about. So then, could someone tell me why, pray tell, does Tifa dress like a hooker? Right? If she's supposed to be this, innocent, virginal, whatever character, right, who's just deeply loyal and fiercely whatever to her man, then why does she dress like that, right? Uh, it's a funny thing about Tifa because I think the idea of it, right? Obviously, the thin pretense is that it's supposed to be, oh, well, she's an athlete, right? Even though she never talks about being an athlete, but she's an athlete, so therefore, she's going to wear this sporty whatever it is that she's wearing. But the other side of it is that Tifa is, I think, supposed to be too innocent to realize that what she's wearing makes her look like a hooker, right? I think that's sort of one of the big subtexts of Tifa's character is that she's too innocent, too pure to realize that, she looks like a prostitute. The other thing about Tifa is that she's also awfully dumb, right? There are a lot of examples of this throughout the entire story, but a good example is the Corneo Mansion storyline, which is started when Tifa decides to quote-unquote infiltrate Don Corneo's mansion, Don Corneo being an infamous sex trafficker rapist guy. So she goes ahead and says, oh, I heard there's information Don Corneo has, and just goes ahead and walks in there. And there's an entire quest line dedicated to pulling her out of that fire, right? And there's never any attempt to sort of justify it on Tifa's part. She just sort of did something ridiculously stupid, and it's like, oh, well, she's an idiot, better go save her now. So Tifa, if she has other defining characteristic, it's being not too bright. So what we've got from our first female character here is a character whose backstory is shallow and inconsequential, full of holes, who's stupid, and whose honestly most defining and memorable characteristic is probably found on your chest. So that's Tifa. What about Aerith? On the surface, Aerith might seem like a bit of a step up in terms of the writing department when it comes to female characters, right? She isn't portrayed as an entirely sexualized person. Her outfit is sensible, her body proportions resemble that of a human, so that seems like a bit of a step up, at least on the surface. But what you rapidly discover as you play the game with a critical eye is that this character, Aerith, is not actually human. She is, rather instead, a goddess. Look at the way that Aerith is portrayed in this one scene where she comes in wearing her fancy dress before you go to infiltrate Don Corneo's mansion. Okay, so apparently Aerith is so divinely beautiful, so shockingly and awe-inspiringly beautiful that she attracts this crowd with fireworks and all this celebration and whatever it is, snapping pictures of the lady, all because she is so utterly and completely and awe-inspiringly beautiful. Okay, that's interesting way of portraying this female character, right? It's not exactly realistic. I've never seen anyone react that way to a woman before, but you know, there you go. That's how they decide to portray Aerith. But we should recognize this for what it is. A male fantasy, right? Aerith is so divine. She's so beautiful. She's so everything that her portrayal is lacking in anything truly human. She's just so pure, so amazing that her feet aren't even supposed to touch the ground. She doesn't fart, she doesn't poop, because she's got to be 100% perfect. Think about Aerith for a moment. Does this character have a single flaw? Is there anything about her that would say to you, the player, okay, this is a less than perfect and ideal human being. This is someone who makes mistakes, or this is someone who, you know, has some things about her that are not altogether, you know, completely idealized. And I would challenge you to come up with anything, right? Because this girl is portrayed as being, you know, benevolent, maternal, playful, intelligent, right? You name the positive adjective, and chances are you'll be describing Aerith, right? She is so utterly and completely perfect as a human being that it's quite frankly fair to say that this character is not supposed to be a human being, right? She's supposed to be some sort of goddess, right? Which is maybe actually appropriate considering the role she plays later in the story as the whole holy and materia and all that business thing. But nevertheless, as far as being a female character is concerned, she's not much better than Tifa when you think about it, because she has about the same amount of humanity as Tifa, which is to say, none. Everything that this character Aerith does is meant to play into this image that she has of being this sort of ideal girlfriend type character, right? All of the little gestures she did, the way she shuffles next to Cloud right there, right? It's all meant to sort of promote that certain image of, oh, here, look at this wholesome, beautiful, and maternal woman that will be my ideal girlfriend, right? That's sort of the whole idea with Aerith. And there's never anything put in place in the game to sort of counteract that, which ultimately, in my opinion, makes her just as fake and silly as Tifa's giant breasts are. Because ultimately, they're just as artificial, and they're just as she's just as unrealistic. What Aerith ultimately is a version of the Virgin Mary that wants to go on a date with you. Right? That's what you're getting when you pick Aerith in Final Fantasy VII. So, let's summarize here. if you look at these two characters without the nostalgia glasses on, without the rose tinted glasses that you might be wearing because you remember them from when you were 15, you'll find that neither of these characters are particularly well written, well expressed, and if anything, are pretty regressive representations of women at the very best. I feel that they were made in that era of gaming where even the idea of having a story that went beyond go save the girl from the bad man was a novel concept, and where the novelty of 3D graphics gave everything a sense of wonder. But the remake, what it drove home to me uh, more than anything, is that we really probably should have a reality check about these two characters. Neither of them is really better than the other. They're both just juvenile male fantasies. We've got on one hand a girl with giant boobs with cauliflower for brains, and on the other hand a idealized girlfriend who's so ideal that her feet barely touch the ground. But fortunately, we have surpassed both of them. Many characters have been made since 1997 that go far beyond anything that happened in Final Fantasy VII. Right? We've had characters with their own story arcs, with their own motivations, their own personality, their own wants, their own, most importantly, flaws. Right? That's one that you don't see in Final Fantasy. And that is the point in which the gaming industry and storytelling as a whole does need to continue to build off of, right? All of this looking back that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is prompting with so many threads and discussions popping up about how Aerith is the perfect waifu or whatnot are ultimately looking at things in a silly way, right? Because when you really think about it, neither of the characters are particularly well made, right? Neither of them uh, really pass muster compared to what has come after. So I would urge everyone to look at Aerith and Tifa not as their ideals, but as a historical curiosity. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.